All right. Hey, y'all. It's still Monday, but I am going to try and get chapter 9 up for Messenger for you guys today so that you can listen to it throughout the week. You can listen to it twice if you need to before the quiz that I will read aloud on Friday. This is chapter 9, as I said, so we're going to review what we kind of read in chapter 8. I think the main thing that we need to remember is that people are going to this trade mart. And Maddie knows that something fishy is going on, and he's gone to Leader, who we know is from the original book, The Giver, and Jonas. And so we know that they've had this conversation that something's going on. These people are trading for these luxuries, but they're giving away some of the very best parts of them. For things that really aren't important, like a gaming machine or a fur coat. We know that the teacher who had the birthmark on his face, he's given up a piece of his heart, his goodness, to have his birthmark removed so that he can have this woman fall in love with him. Okay, so we know that this has come to people's attention, and his daughter even told Maddie about this whole thing going on, and she's upset about this trading, and Leader wishes that it would stop, and Maddie's trying to figure out just what exactly is going on. So this has brought us to chapter 9. I'm going to read it aloud. You guys follow with me. We're page 85. Okay, this is a fairly short chapter. And yeah, so let's get through it. If you want, you can knock out that quiz early in the week and kind of take a little bit of a break on Friday. I'll read it now. You know, the quiz is in there. I will do the read aloud on Friday. Okay, here's doing something crazy. All right, chapter 9. There was much talk in village about the coming meeting. Maddie heard it everywhere, people arguing about the petition. By now, because you know this petition is to keep people from coming in the village. Okay, so by now some of the latest group of new ones were out and about, their sores clearing up, their clothes clean and hair combed, frightened faces eased, and their haunted, desperate attitudes changing to something more serene. Their children played now with other children of village, racing down the lanes and paths in games of tag and hide and seek. Watching them, Maddie remembered his own child self, his bravado, the terrible anguish it had concealed. He had not believed anyone would ever want him, ever, until he came to village, and even then he had not trusted it in its kindness for a long time. As we know, Maddie had kind of a rough childhood. We learned about that in Gathering Blue. But now that he's in village, he's very much accepted and loved. Okay, so page 86. With Frolic, remember that's his new dog. With Frolic scampering at his heels, Maddie made his way toward the marketplace to buy some bread. Good morning, he called cheerfully to a woman he encountered on the path. She was one of the new ones, and he remembered her from a recent welcome. Her eyes had been wide in her gaunt face that day. She was scarred, as if by unattended wounds, and one arm was held crookedly so that it was awkward for her to do things. But today she looked relaxed and was making her unhurried way across the path. She smiled at Maddie's greeting. "Stop it, Frolic, down!" Maddie scolded his puppy, who had jumped to grab and tug at the frayed edge of the woman's skirt. Grudgingly, Frolic obeyed him. The woman leaned down to pat Frolic's head. "It's all right," she said softly. "I had a dog once. I had to leave him behind," she said with a slight accent. Like so many of the people in village, she had brought her way of speaking from her old place. "Are you settling in?" "Yes," she told him. "People are kind. They're patient with me. I've been injured, and I have to relearn some things. It will take time." "Patience is important here because we have so many in village who have difficulties," Maddie explained. "My father—" He paused and corrected himself. "I mean the man I live with. He's called Seer. You've probably met him. He's blind. He strides around everywhere on these paths without a problem. But when he first arrived and had just lost his eyes—" "I have a concern," the woman said suddenly, and he knew it was not a concern about the condition of the path and directions to the building. He could see that she was worried. You can take any concern to leader. She shook her head. Maybe you can answer. It's about the closing of village. I hear talk of a petition. So she's worried about this because she's a new one, and they're talking about not letting any new people into village. So she's obviously worried. But Maddie says, You're already here, Maddie reassured her. You needn't worry. You're part of us now. They won't send you away, even if they close village. I brought my boy with me, Vladik. He's about your age. Maybe you've noticed him. Maddie shook his head. He hadn't noticed the boy. There had been a large crowd of new ones. He wondered why the woman would be worried for her son. Perhaps he was having trouble adjusting to village. Some new ones did. Maddie himself had. When I came here, he told her, I was scared, lonely too, I think, and I behaved badly. I lied and stole, but look, now I'm fine. I'm hoping to get my true name soon. On page 88. No, my boy's a good boy, she said. He doesn't lie or steal, and he's strong and eager. They have him working in the fields already, and soon he'll go to school. Well then, no need to worry about him. She shook her head. No, I don't worry about him. It's my others. I brought Vladik, but I had to leave my other children behind. We came first, my boy and I, to find the way. It was such a long, hard trip. The others are to come later, the little ones. My sister will bring them after I have made a place here. Her voice faltered, but now I hear people saying that the border will close and I don't know what to do. Think maybe I should go back, leave Vladik here to make a life and go back to my little ones. Maddie hesitated. He didn't know what to say to her. Could she go back? She had been here only briefly, so it was not yet too late. Surely Forrest would not entangle the poor woman yet, but if she did, what would she go back to? He didn't know how the woman had been injured, but he knew that in some places, it had been true too in Maddie's old place, people were punished in terrible ways. He looked at her scars, at her unset broken arm, and wondered if she had been stoned. That means that she had been hit with rocks. So he's thinking maybe that's her injury. Of course she wanted to bring her children to the safety of village. They'll be voting tomorrow, Maddie explained. You and I can't vote because we don't yet have our true names, but we can go and listen to the debate. We can speak if we want, and we can watch the vote. He told her how to find the platform before which people would gather. Using her good hand, the woman grasped Maddie's hand with a warm gesture of thanks as she turned away. At the market stall, he brought a loaf of bread from Jean, who tucked a chrysanthemum blossom into the wrapping. She smiled at Frolic and leaned down to let him lick some crumbs from her fingers. Are you going to the meeting tomorrow? He asked her. I suppose so. It's all my father talks about, Jean sighed and began to rearrange her wares on the table. Once it was books and poetry, she said with sudden and passionate anguish. I remember when I was small, after my mother died, he would tell me stories and recite poems at dinner. Then later he told me about people who had written them. By the time we studied it in school, you remember, Maddie, studying literature? It was all so familiar to me, because of the way he had taught me when I didn't even know he was teaching. Maddie remembered. He used different voices. Remember Lady Macbeth's? Out, damned spot! Out, I say! He tried to repeat the lines with the sinister yet regal voice Mentor had used. Jean laughed. And Macduff? I cried when my father recited Macduff's speech about the deaths of his wife and children. Maddie remembered that speech as well. Standing by the bakery stall with Frolic scampering about at their feet, Maddie and Jean recited the lines together. All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, hell-kite. All? What? All my pretty chickens in their darn at one swoop. I cannot but remember such things that were most precious to me. I did a very bad job reading that just then. I'm sorry. Then Jean turned away. She continued restacking the loaves on her table, but clearly her thoughts were someplace else. Finally, she looked up at Maddie and said in a puzzled voice, It was so important to him, and he made it important to me, poetry and language, and how we use it to remind ourselves of how our lives should be lived. Then her tone changed and became embittered. Now he talks nothing of the stock tender's Now he talks nothing but of the stock tender's widow. Remember, that's that lady that he likes. And of closing village to new ones. What has happened to my father? So they're saying he used to be such a nice guy, and he read to them and read poetry and did voices like Jesus does. But now all he talks about is this lady that he's got this crush on, and how he wants to close the borders of village. So he doesn't have that kind heart that he used to have. He's really just only thinking about himself. Matty shook his head. He didn't know the answer. The reciting of Macduff's famous speech had reminded him of the woman he had spoken to on the path, the woman who feared for the lost children's future. All my pretty ones. Suddenly he felt that they were all of the doomed. He had forgotten completely about his own power. He had forgotten the frog. Remember the frog in the field? So that's what he's referring to, and he's like starting to remember this power that he has of healing. So maybe in chapter 10 we will figure out how he's going to use the good that he has to help fix the problems that are coming up in village. So that is chapter 9. You can read it throughout this week, listen to it. Go ahead and take the quiz if you want, but I will do the read aloud for the quiz on Friday. Just the same kind of routine as we've had the last couple weeks of digital learning, and I will be updating the calendar so that we can finish Messenger before the end of the school year. Okay? Well, that is chapter 9. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk soon.